They're on earphones right now. They can't hear how much we hate them.
So you can tell, like, the compromise right now is not being very present as parents, right? Our children are watching TV.
When we shoot our, like we just shot our kids for Natgeo on Safari, and the whole idea is like kids on Safari. And I have to write the editor every time we send the audio in, and I'm like, don't listen to the fucking audio track on the cameras. Listen to the separate audio track that we cut, because you don't want to listen to me saying, would you fucking just look at the lion, just look at the lion, just stop whining and look at the lion.
But there really is no balance, you know. So for us, at least again, this is just our story, right? So when it came to the Safari and Kenya, there was actually a moment where we decided, where we weren't present parents. So there were 2 days where we decided we really have to do the shoot and be the photographers. So we sent them off to a Maasai warrior.
In a Maasai village.
And we came in a Maasai village, and we came back and they had spears and machete. But hey,
like an actual
they had an actual machete. But they washed off the poison to kill the lion, so win.
Yeah.
But then some days we were like, you know what, we have to be present because these kids should learn. And so we put our cameras down and we were just with them.
For a little bit, for like an hour. We put our cameras down for an hour.
So like it's one of those things where balance is not necessarily something that we can tell you about, but we can tell you about wanting to compromise. So okay, so I don't even know what we're talking about. This.
Well, we're doing shoulda could, and then you shoulda could.
It's about also
prayer.
No.
Yes.
No. It's about also understanding not to judge yourself. So be okay with your strengths and your weaknesses, and not go with what you think you should be as an individual and as a photographer, but what you could be. Right?
Backstreet Boy to
that.
All rock, maybe. I don't know.
Just that.
That's your Lululemon.
And so we've come to realize that, you know, there are all these things that we have to be in order to take measured risks and, I guess, succeed, whatever succeed means to you. And that would be adaptation. Or prayer.
Cool. And drugs. They help a lot.
Adaptation. Okay, so
my origin story is a little weird. So hit play, but you don't know that.
No, it's not really fast.
Just
Yeah.
Whatever.
Sorry, guys. Wi-Fi is very fast.
There you go. I am a failed comic book artist. That's originally how I started. I interned at Marvel, worked at a comic book shop, went to art school. That's all I wanted to do was draw superheroes. I'm a bit of a geeky nerd. I prefer Star Trek over Star Wars. It gives you a basis for who I am. I was bad, so what I did was I got into photography to Still there on the story. Don't rush me. So basically, I was on a sports team, and I wanted to trace people who had real muscles to make realistic comic book superheroes. But it was semi-awkward to have the dudes on my team come in and pose for me after practice. This was the late 90s. Girlfriends would do it, but a few guys on the soccer team would, and it just got weird after a while. So I would go out to photo bookstores and get copies of Nude Men Part 7. These giant books of nude photography, Herbert stuff, and I'd be tracing them in the bookstore to make better comic books. And I actually ended up getting a job in the morgue of the medical school attached to my university so I could draw dead people, which is a slightly flaccid way of drawing people. But one day I pulled out this giant photo book that I thought was another nude photography book, and it actually was Natgeo's Inferno. People know James Natgeo, a photojournalist. He just does wars. He's been doing wars for 30 years. And I pulled up this book called Inferno and it changed my life. And I was like, this is what, I had this eureka moment sitting in this bookstore being like, this is what I need to do. And I ended up going to Paris to live with my girlfriend at the time, who wasn't her, and kind of learn about photojournalism and the birthplace of photojournalism. And I will say that my first lesson that I can give everyone about how to succeed is that when I approached a photo agency about going to Israel and Palestine to photograph the Second Intifada in late 2000, they said they really needed a photographer who could speak Arabic and Hebrew. And I lied, and I said I could, and I was fluent in both. They gave me 400 rolls of chrome film and sent me on my way, paid for my plane ticket. I didn't have body armor, I didn't even have a camera. I actually bought my camera and my body armor at a pawn shop in Jerusalem when I got there. And I was shot on the first day in my calf. And I still can't grow hair on the calf. So, there you go. But, so, secret everywhere else, well, except my calf. No need to get that intimate, Marvi.
Personal about it.
So, that's how I started. And I was like really into it. And I traveled around. I was in Gaza and spent a lot of time in the West Bank. Ended up getting the crap beaten out of me by about 20 men who dragged me into the street, Jewish settlers, and beat the shit out of me. And like broke everything in my body. And a friend of mine who was selling Joe McNally's old Nikon cameras on this new website called eBay, which is totally new back then. I was like, I have all these cameras lying around, why don't I send you one? And you'll have to bring the cameras back to Time Magazine when you come back to the US and you can show them whatever you do. So he ended up sending me a camera, I made some pictures, I came back. I ended up getting an assignment out of it in the US, and then when the lead up to the Iraq War in 2003 was happening, I was broke. I had $7.35 left in my bank account. It was actually the bank account. The bank is called Chevy Chase, who the actor got his name from. And so I still have the slip. It's like at my mom's house. I should frame it. Like $7.35 left in that bank account. And I went to go apply for a job at Starbucks. Which was actually the Starbucks that we had our first date at, like years later. But they turned me down. But I walked into Corbis, which is Bill Gates' old photo agency that he eventually sold to Getty. But their photographer that was going to do the embed in Iraq for the war was Israeli. Really great guy, Shaul Schwartz, we're good friends. Yeah, he's a filmmaker now too as well. And you had to go in through Kuwait to get into the war. So all the US forces were amassing in Kuwait before they went into Iraq. And the Kuwaitis wouldn't give him a visa because he was Israeli. So last minute, a week before the war, they were like, we really need someone to go to Iraq. Do you want to go to Iraq? And I was like, yes. I'm going with the same experience that I had in Paris of lying through my teeth. They're like, you know how to shoot war? And I showed them this picture. And this image is of two kids throwing Molotov cocktails at a tank from an abandoned building, an Israeli tank. There were two Palestinian kids throwing Molotov cocktails. And they're like, how do I know you're ready for war? It's like, because I'm street smart enough to know that after you throw a Molotov cocktail from an abandoned building, you should probably get the fuck out of the abandoned building. And they blew it up, like not a minute after I left and made this image. And they're like, okay, you're ready to go. You know what you need to do. I was like, yes. And then I went to a friend of mine and I said, what do I do now? He's like, here, take this number. And he gave me the number of James Natgeo and Christopher Morris, who were the people who inspired me to become a photojournalist. I said, why don't you call them and ask them what you need to pack? And I remember it's like 2 days before I shipped out to cover the Iraq War, and I'm like, okay. How do I pack this? And Chris Morris actually totally did, like, he really bombed me on this one. He was like, you know what, you should take a film camera with you. A couple rolls of film in case they drop an EMP. and like destroys all digital gear. And I was like, you're right. You're totally right. And so I carried the entire fucking war, a Nikon F3 with me, and like rolls of film for no other reason. And he kept on asking me, he was like, do you have that roll? Do you have that film camera? He's like, yeah. I was like, you're fucking. Okay. So there I was.
Yeah, totally nice guy, by the way.
Totally nice guy. But he really tried to haze me on that one. Let me totally forgot that one. So I'll actually go and finish it. But this was the image that started my career. This was my first round of world image. Was based on the death of another human being. And that has been a lesson that I had very early on in my career, which I had to grapple with, and still to this day, it's 15 years later, that I still think about. That I did this Major Gregory Stone, and red alert. But basically, there was a grenade attack on Camp Pennsylvania the night before the war started, and I am in the tent sleeping. Grenades go off, scud alert goes off, a British tornado jet crashed. It all happened at the same time. I didn't put my gas mask on because I wear contact lenses, and so like the first time I put my gas mask on, I couldn't see anything. I take it off, put my contact lenses in. I actually lost one of my contact lenses when the grenade blew up, and I poked myself in the eye. So I got like one contact lens in. I'm wearing just boxer shorts because it's the middle of the night. I'm like up. I have the thing on the head. I have a hypodermic needle on my leg. You had atropine that you had to inject in yourself in case there was a gas attack, and I was like holding off. I didn't want to do that. It made my heart explode. And then at the same time, a U.S. soldier came up and he said, "You're an American." And I said, "Yes, I am." And he gave me an M16 with no clip in it, no magazine. And he was like, "Just take the gun." And so I'm also wearing a gun. So I'm half naked wearing a gun with my eye closed, with the gas mask in my head and an atropine needle on my leg. And I turned around the corner and I made this image. And it was my first round of the world image. It went everywhere. I was the only photographer there at the time. And actually, the court case against the soldier who did this, who was a disgruntled American soldier who fragged his own commander's tent the night the war started. He actually got the death penalty, and they used all my images from that in the court case, which again is the second death that personally I had to deal with. And it's one of those things where, as a photojournalist, I think about it a lot. And I get a lot of crap from other photojournalists when I make this point. You can't be a photojournalist without something really bad happening. Like, I don't go to a war zone and say, "I hope it's all happy." No, I need someone to die. I need somebody to get shot in order to make the pictures that define what photojournalism is. Like, I'm not going to war to cover balloons, right? And so when you have this idea you want to be a war or conflict photographer, you're hoping for conflict because that's what you want to make images of. And it's the same way like maybe a doctor has to deal with. If everyone was healthy, then I wouldn't be doing anything. So like a doctor needs people to be sick. An accountant needs people to, cheat on their taxes. I don't know. But it's like you need something bad to happen in order to make these images. And for me it took me a long time to figure out that has its effect on your soul in many ways.
How did you feel when you saw that image on a computer screen?
I was 23 when I covered the war. I was the youngest photographer in Iraq, and I was really immature. And I don't know that I thought about it in the same way I think about it now. I don't know that I thought about seeing dead kids and dead bodies and mass graves in the same way I do now because I have kids. I remember going and visiting the mass graves that they found in the south, in the Najaf, like after the war, when they were digging up all the mass graves that Saddam Hussein, where he had killed during the Shia uprising in the 90s. Hundreds of thousands of bodies. I spent 6 days going back to the same mass graves photographing skulls. They're not in this presentation, but I was drawn to making images of those things because I thought it was important. And I grew up thinking about important things. Like my dad was born in a concentration camp. So he was a Holocaust survivor. and he came to the U.S. And so I grew up really, really aware of those things, but I don't think I had the maturity to know how it was going to affect me as an image maker, to say that I'm doing this and I need to see these things. And there's a certain level of, there's a certain macabreness to it, in a way, that you need to see this death in order to make images of it, to be anti-war. And these are all lessons that, like, I've learned over many years of doing it. Like with this image, this is actually at a mass grave. And I went with about 20 men to dig up their 4 cousins who were killed in a mass grave, who were executed. They were shot in the back of the head and dumped in this grave in Abu Ghraib before it became the American prison. And we're so used to the concept of women crying in media, but we're not used to men openly weeping. Like, it's just not something that's represented that much, and that's a problem with sexism in many parts of many different industries. But when these guys dragged out the bodies of these 4, and these were 4 guys with their skeletons, and they were still in their clothes with their wallets in their back pockets. All these men just started crying, just openly weeping. And I remember having the camera up, and I'm thinking about my composition, I'm thinking about my depth of field and what's going on, and it's super bright in Iraq, and I'm just thinking about that. And when I took the camera down to Chimp, I looked around and I saw all these weeping men. I couldn't help but start crying too. And so I was openly crying for no other reason than a bunch of men are crying around me. I couldn't help it. And then as soon as I picked up the camera and started shooting again, I stopped crying. And again, it's a lesson I learned about. We always say, like, you need to be intimate, like, be a photojournalist, be a photographer, you need to get in with the people that you're photographing. But at the same time, that camera is a shield from experiencing everything that you are part of, so that you can get through it, so you can make those images.
Do you ever feel guilt for, like, photographing people when they're seeing their family members dead?
Only when I put the camera down.
Yeah.
When I have the camera up. No. You know, the hardest thing in the world for me isn't that. It's actually photographing in, like, churches or mosques or synagogues when people are praying. I feel really intrusive there. Or the New York City subway. For some reason, photographing on the subway terrifies me, because I could just be shooting someone and then I take the camera down and have to look right at them until the next stop. And that's actually really hard. But again, it's different. Sometimes, like, if I have a press pass around my neck and I have both my cameras and the biggest bodies and the longest lenses, all of a sudden I have, that's my ticket. That's my shield. So I actually, you know, or if you're with another photographer, and like when Marvi and I walk out and I'll do street photography, I'll make very different images than I'm by myself. I actually call it shame displacement. So it's like, it's having a crutch. It's having someone to, like, take that icky feeling you have that you might be taking and just put it on them.
How do you do that?
Just by having someone there. So like, you know, it's like if I'm by myself and I'm taking a
there are all
picture.
these assumptions when he's alone. You know, he's this big, bald guy. There are all these assumptions of who he is.
Yeah, people think I'm a soldier, Jason Bourne, pedophile. Yeah, the scariest assignment I ever had was for Stern magazine, where they asked me to go around and photograph New York City playgrounds for their travel issue.
Yeah, so he took
Just look at me. Do you want me to go to playgrounds and photograph in New York playgrounds? I was like, she's coming with me, and she's gonna get an assistant fee, and she's gonna go up to all the moms and tell them to relax. That I'm not a crazy person photographing their kids. But so this was what I did for years. Was these kind of images. This was on the worst day I ever experienced in Iraq. It's August 4th, 2007. 10-car convoy, 5 made it back to base, 5 IEDs. I lost all the nerves on the right side of my body. A lot of men were killed. I was actually injured enough that I'm still injured from that, and it's been 11 years later. I just had surgery in June on, like, the last piece of trauma. So it stays with me. But I was lucky that I made an image like this really early in my career. And Marvi hates this image in a way because I show it a lot. But the thing is, you look at this image and it's pretty, and no one knows what the fuck is happening. They're wearing earphones. And that was interesting because people decided to look at. You heard me say that? I owe you $1. I owe you $1. So all of a sudden, I realized what I needed to do was create an aesthetic to make people look at the content. Like, I wanted to create something that, because we went from 2002 seeing 1,000 images a day to today we see close to 5,000 images a day. And so when you have like Nick Ut's image from the AP of the little girl covered in napalm from Vietnam, that famous image, you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So that was like only one of 8 images that were transmitted back to the Bureau that day using a telefax machine. In the 60s, the telefax machine was this giant tube that had magnets in it that you could put a silver gelatin print in and spin it. It would take about 4 hours to transmit the image back. So all the newspapers had only a choice of a few images to use on that day, as compared to when I was in Iraq, I had my own satellite dish that was the size of this computer. And used radio wave transmission that you did not want to stand in front of or you would never have kids. But I could send 50 or 60 images back every single day.
Or which probably explains the kids that they have.
Right.
They're very interesting.
3 testicles. But as like but so I decided I was really upset because people weren't paying attention to the Iraq War. And I mean, like I know you look at the news, like whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, or Juba, and you're like, oh, another 20 people got killed today. And they're faceless and they're nameless. And it just bleeds into our lives because we don't really pay attention anymore. And so I wanted to figure out, I was upset because I spent 6 years in Iraq. It's like, how do you tell a story? How do you do something different? And this image began the way of me thinking that I needed to create the aesthetic was my narrative that would get people into the content. And that really kind of helped me adapt what I was going to do moving on. But I'm going to break up my story now and allow Marvi. She's actually
15 minutes in there.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? What is actually happening in that image?
It was a man going swimming. It was 45 degrees in Baghdad that day, and I'm driving, slightly inebriated, to a journalist party in one of the Palestine hotels, and I'm driving over the Tigris River on a bridge. We like name my memo would be like a bridge over the Tigris River instead of a bridge over the river. And Lindsay Dario was in the car with me. We were sharing a room at a hotel, and she had this new Nikon 14mm lens, and I said, "Can I try that out?" She put it on my camera, and as I'm driving, veering through lanes because traffic after the war was awesome. You could just do after you won. There were no traffic laws. There was this guy climbing the light post to go swimming because it was 45 degrees and there was no air conditioning because there's no electricity. And he's just jumping off the light post to go swimming. Photograph that as a guy. Nothing more than that.
It looks a lot more.
It looks a lot more because we have a history of lynching photography. At least in the US, there's a history of lynching photography. There people read into it. And I didn't have a tattoo of that guy. But people read into that image what they wanted to see. And so that taught me a lot going forward about how I wanted to make it. And it was having Marvi at my side that helped me figure that out. Because she helped me kind of dilute my thoughts because I'm ADD.
Sorry, I just wanted to see the image again now that we know. Nice. Thanks.
Yeah, shoot while slightly drunk and driving. Nothing bad would happen.
So my history is kind of riddled with a lot of lying, and I guess like going into situations where I would say I know how to do things. So I went to the U.S. as a foreign student, and my visa was expiring, and a week before, or about like a month before my student visa expired, I decided I didn't want to go home. I wasn't ready, I wasn't done with the US, so I applied for a graduate assistantship. For graduate school. It was the summer, and they weren't making any decisions until later, but I don't know, but I had a bit of a portfolio because I took some photos while I was traveling and did some stories in undergrad. And I wrote this essay and I called them 1 week before my visa had expired, and it was still the summer, it wasn't the fall yet, which is when school started. And I called the communications department, and I managed to say something, and they're like, okay, fine, we'll look at your application. And the next day they called and they said, you're in. And I go, oh good, can I start like next week? So I started school, and that's how my visa ended up extending. When I wasn't, then I got into grad school. In grad school, as a foreign student, you're not allowed to work. You're only allowed to work inside. And inside, there aren't very many jobs. It's, the graduate assistantship. So I applied for graduate assistantship. Someone said, do you know that, this Quark, it was Quark Express, which is kind of like a design, and magazine design. And I was like, yeah, sure. I didn't. So I was always one chapter ahead, but I did it well enough that they hired me for a graduate assistantship for the school year, and so that paid for my school. And I kind of carried that on to my internships. I got, internships while I was in school, and I was already working for a newspaper, so I was one of the few students who ended up getting employed for like the bigger newspapers in the state. And again, I decided I was going to intern in California, didn't like California, and I was going to move to New York City. And I was going to move to New York City with $1,500 in my bank account. And I was going to make it, because a lot of it has been because I just naivete and just pure ignorance. I had no idea that with $1,500 in your bank account, you're really not going to be able to do much in New York City. But I went there, I wasn't scared, not because I was afraid, but because I was just ignorant about what it took to make it in New York. And I ended up just introducing myself to a photographer, and I happened to have a website at that time, which was unheard of, because in my free time I would just make things. So I made myself a website, and this photographer, Vincent Lacar, was like, he actually answered me right away. I emailed him, he answered me right away. He goes, I never really respond to any of these emails, but your portfolio is really good. Why don't you come and assist me? And it was Hugh Hefner that he was taking photos of, but I dropped everything. I was like, I'll be right there. I got a ticket because I double parked in New York City, and you get a ticket right away. But I didn't care because I was assisting Vince Lacar. I didn't even care about Hugh Hefner, but I was just like, yeah, I had a car on my first. And I ended up assisting him. He liked, I guess, the bravado or whatever he decided to call it, that he said, you're cool, let me introduce you to the New York Times. So I got to New York and I worked right away, which was incredibly lucky. I found out much later from other photographers, because apparently that's not normally the story. And I would give myself assignments. It wasn't like I was this big shot photographer, right? I worked right away, but I also had a lot of downtime. And so during my downtime, I would just give myself assignments. And one of the things that I was really interested in are, these way of life in New York City that I just don't, my children are there, that I just have never seen. So I was like, why don't I, take the movie or the TV show literally and just take photos of sex literally in the city. So I would make myself, I for some reason I would get access to a lot of these places, like dungeons. And the one thing that I learned is that And I've always felt this about myself. A lot of people think that, you know, my height and my stature has been, I guess, a detriment or a disadvantage for me, but it never really has. I think the fact that I'm so small and I'm not intimidating, I can kind of weasel my way into certain situations. So when people are like, do you want to go to a dungeon? I'd like to go to a dungeon. People don't assume that I'm like, you know, this weird, kinky person. They're like, all right, whatever. I would get into these burlesque shows. And the one thing that I really learned, besides learning early on how to use, you know, your personality to your advantage, was also to really understand at a young age to just kind of let go of all these preconceived notions that you have about your subjects, right? Or at least understand what they are. Understand your biases so that by the time you're in there, you can kind of check yourself. One of the things that I got access to, and again, that had a lot to do with me being me, is that I got called to do, because I had this body of work on sex, I got called to do this story on Larry Flint, which is the guy who founded Hustler magazine. And I was there, and there were all these like paparazzi guys around me, and like they take the flash photography, but I'm there like making photos of the club, and then like Larry right there. And then this woman who was right next to him was like, "Hey, you don't look like you belong. Come over here." And so I started chatting her up. And she's like, "That's a really cool project. I'd like you to meet my husband, Larry." I'm like, "Oh, Larry, awesome. Nice to meet you. I'm doing this project. Can I get access?" And he was like, "Yeah, totally. You can have full access."
Why is that not know you back then?
So I had full access to all these places, but then I really got to know the people. And, you know, a lot of the people were surprisingly, like one of them, she was like a PhD student in sociology, and she was kind of using her work as her practice because she was getting to know a lot of people. And so, you know, these were these lessons that I learned early on that I felt was a very good lesson for me because I was able to apply it all throughout my career. Another thing that I did was that I just didn't give a shit, right? Like, there was a red alert? There was a red alert, there was an Al-Qaeda bombing, code red in New York City during 9/11. I didn't have an assignment, so I was like, fuck it, I'll just go with my whole gun. And there was a photographer there, and it ended up being Stephen Ferry, and I actually called him when I was making this presentation, and I asked him what he saw. And because I remember when I saw him, he was like, "Is that a cool guy?" And he had this look on his face, and I said, "Stephen, what was that look?" And he said, "Oh, I thought it was really interesting that you felt like you could just go in there with a whole gun to take a news photo. But I thought it was also naive because I didn't think that you could capture the emotion of the event with a plastic camera." And this ended up being a double truck and a cover of a national magazine. And Stephen,
he was working for.
no, he was working for time, but he ended up using that experience as his, I guess, as in his introductory class, Photo 101 class, about just, again, like not being so boxed in about what your idea is and how you're supposed to take a photo. So this spec work that I did ended up getting picked up and getting in the cover of a major magazine, and this was only a few months of me being in New York, and this was the work that got people's attention, and I ended up getting represented. And I was one of the 2 female photographers when Getty, they're no longer there, but at one point Getty decided that they were going to have a boutique agency called Reportage. And before Reportage was Reportage, before Reportage was even Reportage, like the really first inception of what Reportage was, I was one of the first women photographers that they represented. And again, like a lot of this was ignorance because I had no idea how hard it would be to even get represented. I felt like my story was common, and people were like, that doesn't really happen. So there was a lot of luck that came my way, and you know, and it was a very, very fast trajectory. Landing in New York City with 1,500 in my bank account and then getting represented right away was pretty quick, but a lot of it was, now in retrospect, was because I was lucky. I made good use of my free time. Like I know a lot of freelance photographers will come to me and they're like, how are you busy? You know, you're not working. And I was like, you should always be working. Like you should either, you know, be
doing something.
You know, in the office doing something or shooting and giving yourself a project. So that was something that I always practiced early on, and I can say that really helped.
And I think serendipity, or like knowing how to take advantage of things like this, because we both lied through our teeth to get our first jobs, basically. But it's not. It's more than that. It's like knowing that like there's an opportunity in front of you and jumping on it, whether you know what it is tangibly, but that you take advantage of these things that come across your path that get you to where you go and that help you. So basically, and that's a lot of this story. This was a 6-year project. Yeah, no, it's a true story. You arrived into Baghdad airport, and the most dangerous road in the world was the airport road, and you had to go from the airport to your hotel, and you always came under fire. So after a while, the military created these things called rhinos, which are, imagine a city bus covered with like 70 tons of implosive body armor, which basically, when a round hit it, explodes outward to take most of the force, right? So it's so heavy that you would like press the gas pedal on Monday and the car would start going 2 weeks later. But there was not a lot of room inside. So you go in with the things you needed the most. So like you get in there, I'd go in with just my gear. And my backpack with my clothes, they would hang outside. And of course we come under fire, and my bag with my clothes gets blown off the vehicle. So it was more like I didn't lose my pants, I lost my underwear and socks and everything. But mostly my pants, because that sounds better. And we were married at the time, and I knew if I called Marvi about this, she'd be like, shut the fuck up. So I called my mom, and I said, Mom, can you go to the Gap and get me a pair of bootcut jeans that back then they were in style? And you could FedEx them to Baghdad because FedEx actually worked. And my mom, who is not sharpest, can I say that? She's not totally on point with some things. She's great with other things. She's like, Ben, why can't you go to the mall? And I was like, there's no mall in Iraq. And I also look like Jason Bourne. And so I can't walk on the street and go shopping for clothes here because I would die. And she said, well, I don't know that because all you do is photograph for the New York Times and it's like bombs and dead people. So I don't know what Iraq looks like. I was like, fine, you know what, Mom? Next time I get into a car, I'm going to photograph outside of every car window and just show you what Baghdad and the rest of Iraq looks like. And this became like a giant, long project of me photographing through every car window of every car I rode in. And it became, in a way, a metaphor for a viewfinder, for like how you looked through a camera or how soldiers saw Iraq themselves. Because most soldiers, when you take most modern militaries, and specifically the British and the American military who had the most soldiers in Iraq at the time, 70% of the military is logistics. So only 30% is an actual fighting force. So 70% of the soldiers who drove around Iraq never got out of their car. They were just moving stuff around, like logistically. And that's how they saw Iraq. And the second part of this project, and actually this became my first book, which Marvi edited, because she's like, you have something more, is that I was qualified to go out with U.S. Special Forces, and I would always go out with a quick reaction team, and they have night vision goggles. And Marvi, we covered that she's from the third world and doesn't like to sit on grass, but she's also crazy about hygiene, specifically teeth hygiene. And she would, not that you packed my bag for me, but like I don't floss. I don't know a lot of people who floss. Does everyone floss? Like, I don't floss. I'm not proud. I brush my teeth. I'm in a war zone. I really don't care that much about it. But she would like throw a dental floss in my bag to like remind me to floss. And dental floss is an amazing tool to connect a military night vision goggle to the front of your lens. And my camera smelled like spearmint for like 3 months, but I would use it like dental floss and I'd wrap it around and through and across the flash mount, and all of a sudden I would be able to like go out and shoot. And when you're going out with a quick reaction team, they're also most of the time going out in environments that have like zero lumen. So cloud cover, no moon, no stars, zero light. So I would have one on my helmet on one eye, my non-shooting eye, to see actually where I was walking. And then I would like pull it up and switch to my camera. And that's exactly the time when I kicked a soda can in the alley or like stepped on a cat. And I was always the guy that like the special forces team would look at me and be like, oh my gosh, you're just ruining our ninja like capabilities here. And this became like another project, whereas the windows was how the West saw Iraq or how soldiers saw Iraq, or a metaphor for the viewfinder. The night vision was the idea that there's no electricity at night in Iraq. So Iraqis themselves didn't get to see what their country looked like at night, but it was only the occupiers and the invaders that did. And so it was like a backwards way of looking at who gets to see what. And so this became actually 2 chapters of a book that I eventually published. And it really got me thinking about creating these like visual narratives to tell the story, whereas like one was night vision and one was windows. That concept, that idea of composition was the story itself. It wasn't the point A to point B, it was like an essay where the actual visual was the story. And so I wanted to continue that. And I was thinking of like really unique ways to do. Can you slow the down? I know you're rushing. But so one part of the story was the oil spill in the Deepwater Horizon when it sunk in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a tough story to tell because we grew up with like the Exxon Valdez oil spill, or the oil spill after the 91 Gulf War, where you see like dudes covered in oil walking around cleaning birds. And this oil spill happened 50 miles offshore in international water. So how do you tell that story? The first 3 weeks, it was like sad fishermen who couldn't go out and fish. And there'd be like a guy sitting on a boat like this. I'm a sad fisherman. And there'd be like 20 wire photographers be like, yeah, look sad! And like trying to make that same image. Like, that's not working. So as the oil rushed in, I sacrificed the rest of my leg hair because they wouldn't let me back into port covered in oil. And I jumped in and I shot straight down into the oil. So I'm standing in about 3 to 4 feet of water, and I'm just shooting straight down and creating this body of work of just trying, like Irving Penn with where it was a Weston who had the rotting peppers, to make something beautiful out of something horrible. That was my concept. Because this is the thing about photography. Hopefully my kids aren't listening right now, because I have one person. But if it's still winter, who has a dog? Does anybody have a dog? Okay. If you're walking your dog in the winter, the coldest winter day, and they take a giant shit, and if the light is right in the morning, the smoke coming off that poop can make an amazing image. And there's no other medium that can capture that. You're not going to have a painter be like, I am going to spend my time making an oil painting of smoking dog shit. And there's no sculptor who's going to make a bronze of that. But photography, you have a moment right there, and you're good, and you can keep on walking. And you can make something, I've tried. I've actually tried. My dog recently defecated, just because my son is listening, and it was a perfect standing turd. It just was standing, smoking. And you remember. And I was like, that's amazing! And I photographed it, because that's cool. Yes, there's something beautiful and something horrible if you can work with it. No, I'm going back to it. Okay. Yeah. So this is another one. This is my sperm oil. The reason why I had no leg hairs, they wouldn't let me back into port with the oil on my legs, so they would throw a razor into my boat as I came back and like said, like, shave your legs. And I'd sit there and shave my legs in front of the Coast Guard, and I told everyone I was a cyclist afterwards. So again, the whole idea is how can I try to do something different? When the New York Times kind of was, after the last bombing I went through in Iraq, I was like, I'm done with like, I don't want to be like blown up constantly. I want to try something else. They transferred me to Afghanistan, where 5 years in Afghanistan, I never was in a single violent situation, ever. Like, the worst I had was when I was arrested and made to smoke up with an entire police precinct. Like, everyone sat down and smoked with me. They said they just wanted to learn English, but we all just got really high. Like, that was the worst that I ever had. But so I was like, how can I do this different? I grew my beard out, and I learned how to walk differently. I got Afghan clothes, and I started shooting with my iPhone. This is like before even the invention of Instagram. I was using Tumblr that actually still exists. And I was like posting images as I was walking around, just like trying to remain incognito. Actually, this is one of my favorite images, because after 3 months of being in Afghanistan, sometimes you just want like some breakfast cereal from like a Western supermarket. And there was like 2 Western supermarkets in Kabul. And only contractors and like soldiers that could get away from base or journalists would go in and buy food there. And like they had like Captain Crunch here. I don't know if you guys have Captain Crunch here, but it's like a horrible kids cereal that reminds me of my childhood. And it would be like stale because it came from like, 3 years ago from an American store and eventually made its way to Afghanistan. But in order to get more people to go shopping at the Western supermarket, they were, like, what can we do marketing-wise? And I would have loved to have been in this meeting where the guy was like, oh, I know what we can do. Why don't we print the giant face of a woman, and you have to walk into her mouth to go shopping? And this was not a good idea. In general, the Taliban were against it, but also like liberal feminists who were everyone I went to school with at university, who followed me. They're like, this is also not a good idea. So my social media following were able to bring together the Taliban and feminists for the first time to say that this was a bad idea. And so it grew on me using Instagram to like talk to people. When I covered Libya and the fighting in Libya in 2011, I was working for GQ, and I knew that I was doing something that was going to be published much later. So I did a deal with them, and I said, let me photograph for Instagram to basically create a marketing campaign for the stuff that's going to be photographed later on. And that was the first time.
They didn't like it.
They didn't like it initially, but it really worked for them in the end, and this was the first time war was actually ever live streamed. And what I did was I had a friend of mine who worked for Al Jazeera, and we put a Wi-Fi dongle in the satellite truck and basically had a Wi-Fi signal in the trenches of Benghazi. And as the bullets were flying overhead, I was like trying to hashtag and like post online. This is Omar, my driver, and it was really I experimented with trying to use captions. And we had a bullet hole. I wanted to know if people actually read captions on Instagram. We had a bullet hole in our car, and I actually asked him why we had a bullet hole, and it was like, told me it was a reminder because he had to kill someone once who shot at him and made that bullet hole. And he never wanted to forget that he actually had to kill someone to defend himself. And that was important to me. That's why he never changed, even though we paid him and he had got enough money to have a new windshield, he wanted to keep that broken windshield because it was a reminder to him. And I thought he could put a human element to the war that we never think of. But people don't really read captions on Instagram anymore. It was funny, people also, because people don't read captions, you sometimes get the wrong message. He was not yelling at me. This was at a protest for federalism in Benghazi, and he actually spit on my head at this moment by accident. Just like, ah! And I was like, oh, sorry, and he rubbed it off my head with the butt of the gun. But yeah, I'm finishing. You're always hurrying me.
Because it's awesome.
But this is the front lines. That's actually a shell casing flying up. So I always thought that the iPhone was, this is like the iPhone 3, and it was good enough to capture what was going on. And it's really funny. It's like everyone's like, why are you in front of the guys with the guns? Because most people who fight in rebel conflicts have no idea what they're doing. So an AK-47, this is a good lesson for anybody who wants to do war photography. It's like learn the guns, right? AK-47, unless you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger in a really good movie, has a range of like 500 yards, 500 meters roughly. These guys were separated by 1.5 kilometers, like the two militaries, right? And they're firing at each other, AK-47s. And so everyone who's standing up is a journalist. We're like, no one's hitting me except maybe you. You know, it's like, there was no way I was going to get shot, ever, except by that guy. Meanwhile, and now I'm, oh wait, should I go through all your images?
I just love
you. I just love you.
I just took about an hour and a half of this to learn.
He wasn't. He just felt like that because he had to listen.
I had to listen to it all the time. So, like I said, a lot of the personal projects and the sex clubs that I did landed me into getting the reportage. And that, I had a good streak of about a couple of years where I was doing international work for them. That was in Kenya, this was in India, and domestic work for them. And I thought like, I made it. I came to New York and I made it. But then my dad died. And that brought me, just a little background, my dad was, he was a university professor, like I told you, but he was also very abusive. He was abusive to my mom and to us. And when I left home and I left for school in the US, I kind of shut that part of my life out. And then when I got news that my dad had died, everything came back. Like all the memories came back. And I couldn't handle it. I think it was just too much emotion to process because I was very young. It was a very tumultuous childhood for me. And I hit a very, I hit a very deep depression. And I was sick. I didn't understand what depression was, especially coming from a culture like the Philippines where you don't talk about that stuff. There's no gradation, right? Mental illness is either you're sane or you're in like a straitjacket. That's how we think of mental illness. And so I didn't really understand what that meant. And so I stopped talking. I was suicidal. And this was actually the day, 2 days before, 2 days after my father died, I got the news. I locked myself in the room. Ben had found out. He was in Iraq. He just landed in Iraq, turned around, and he came back. And I was in a catatonic state. But if you don't know me a lot, I'm very talkative, but I couldn't talk, or I just couldn't bring myself. So I was so tired. I don't know if any of you have ever been depressed, but the actual state of depression also affects you physically. So it felt like I was sleeping 16-hour days, and it felt like someone was sitting on me, like I could not move, but I still wanted to say something. So I would just write everything down, or I would photograph. Because for me, photographing, I'm a quite analytical person, and I didn't understand what depression was. I didn't grow up in the West, like bulimia and anorexia was not even anything we understood in the Philippines. Those were things that I learned when I went to school in the US. So depression was not something I understood. And so for me to be able to understand something, I'm a very visual person, so I would take a photo of it. It would kind of remove me from the situation, and so when I would see it, I could study it. Instead of just seeing my hand, I could kind of remove myself from that situation and look at the print in my hand. And this was the day that Ben had decided to commit into the psych ward because I was becoming a harm to myself. Photography was one of those things that beyond the fact that it was cathartic, it was also something that helped me explain what I was feeling to my therapist. So instead of telling my therapist what anxiety looked like, because I didn't have the energy to actually speak the words, I would just show her photographs. So a lot of the therapy sessions were very quiet, and she would talk and she would look at my photos, but I would just nod, yes, no, shrug. So Ben never left my side, but Spud also never left my side. He was there. He never asked me to walk him. He never asked me to feed him, but he was there. I had another dog at that time named Wheat. I had no idea where Wheat was, and I will talk about Wheat later on in the images that I'll show you. But Spud was my companion. He was with me, and Ben was with me. And this is one of those images where, again, the word evaded me. Ben had come back from Iraq. I had locked myself. Lots of people were trying to get in, and I was cutting. And Ben finally got in from the airport. He went straight into the room and jimmied the door with a butter knife. And he saw this, and I was composing. It's like there's a window, there's blood, and I was really like composing. And he walks into the door and he starts screaming. And he was like, "What are you doing? Like this is your friends, this is your family, this is your life. This isn't something you make art with. This is sick." And for some reason, I had to document this. I'm an obsessive documenter, if that's even a word. So I took my journal and I wrote in quotes, "What are you doing? This is your family, these are your friends, this is your life, that's sick." And that's how a good part of my year was. I was pretty silent. I was just journaling and photographing. And I would photograph everywhere. Again, like it's one of those things, I don't know, again, if any of you have ever had a depressive episode, but you're physically weighed down. So Ben had to take me to the bathroom. He had to undress me, but I would still take photos of it. It was just a way for me to process what was going on inside my head. My mom never left me, so even when I was in bed and just staring out the window, my mom would sit there and I would photograph her. And again, like certain photographs hit me at I read certain photographs differently at different parts of my life. Just like that, that photograph of the soldier who died. This was the day that Ben committed me to the psych ward for the first time. And this is the reason why, was because I had a panic attack for some reason, and I decided to just take a lot of Klonopin to calm down, but I didn't wake up. So Ben was at Adorama. He was at the photo store at that time, and my mom called him, and Ben was like, "Call EMT, the ambulance, put her in the bathtub." And so my mommy put me in the bathtub, and 3 months after I got out of the hospital, I wanted to study that day. I wanted to see what the scene looked like from the perspective of my mom. So when I made this image, it was merely a study for me. It was very analytical. What did it look like? How did it look like from the perspective of my mom? And then this won like some big award in France, and I saw it again, and I saw people reacting to it. So I read that differently because I realized that there was an emotional connection for other people. And then I left it. I completely forgot about this project for a very long time. And then I had kids, and I founded this nonprofit called 1 in 20 on mental illness and photography, and I opened this again, but I was already a mother. And this photo, 10 years later, is when it actually shattered me, because I was already a mother. And so many things hit me at that time, because I felt compassion for my mother. I couldn't even understand like why I put her through that. What it must have felt like for my mother to see her youngest child wanting to give up. And then I also felt a lot of pain for myself because I felt like I don't know if I could survive seeing my children give up on life. And so it wasn't until 10 years later that this photo really, really hit me. And it gave me a big understanding, and also, again, as an artist, you know, you take a lot of these things very personally, how people read your work, but you have to understand that some people just may not be ready, some people are not at that point in their lives, or some people just don't relate, and it has nothing to do with you. And this image taught me that. And I photographed everything. I photographed Ben, and I wrote everything. Even in the psych ward, I would write these quotes, and I realized that it was at this moment that carried me through my work now, where I document my children's, you know, their little comments, and I posted on Instagram. It started in the psych ward. You know, when I would have like these parallel conversations with like this guy who would pace up and down the hallway who's schizophrenic, and he would have his own conversation and I would have my own conversation, but for some reason we were having parallel conversations, but we were also understanding each other. It was really weird. Some of the most interesting people really are in the psych ward. That's not meant to be disparaging or like sarcastic or anything. They're quite interesting people I've met there. So anyway, fun times.
So Marvi was, at the time, wasn't really wondering where I was with our other dog. But I had come back from all of these bombings in Iraq and was really shook up. And I lost my long thoracic nerve, and everything I controlled the right side of my body died. And I actually ended up getting this thing called wing scapula, where I had no muscle holding my shoulder blade down. So every time I lifted my hand, my shoulder blade would go right through my back of my back. And you know, but Marvi was in the hospital, and I had no one else to talk to about what I was going through except our other dog, and even he couldn't really understand what I was saying. So I would go on these long walks.
Why was I in the psych ward?
Yeah.
We were talking to dogs.
I didn't get answers. But so I mean, I was going through, you know, all these bombings, all these people who died in front of me. That day in 2007 was the beginning when Marvi was going through her stuff, and one of the soldiers who died, we were just looking at like the Iron Man 2 trailer, and he's like, I can't wait to see that when I get back, and he died. He got blown up. I was covered in his intestines, like literally. And I always remember that. And I at one point when does everyone mind if I sit here? And at one point when over the course of the bombings, I started taking a Sharpie out of my pocket and writing. Because I was finding my hands and fingers all over the area we were locked down. I was furiously writing my blood type over every piece of clothing that I had. And it was one of these things like I had no one to talk to about. And so Marvi was in the hospital, and I would ride the subways late at night and pick fights. And eventually got into a fight club. And I would on purpose want to get beaten. I actually broke my nose, never got fixed. Marvi thinks I look like a Picasso painting. But it's sort of a reminder, I just wanted to feel something too. In the same way where Marvi was cutting, I didn't do that. I just felt such like shame and guilt for surviving. But a friend of mine was like, you're not a very good fighter, which is true. You sort of blink a lot when you get punched in the face, which is not really good for boxing at all. So he's like, maybe you should just, document it instead. And so it actually became another very long project where I started photographing underground cage fights in the US before kind of the UFC got big or anything like that. And you know, this is kind of when I started getting tattoos and I was like, for a long time I was 160, 170 pound kind of small runner. And then I just started fighting and getting to the gym and eating more, and just getting bigger and more intimidating, which I think I always wanted to do, and got like more tattoos so I could fit in with these crowds, and just started photographing the environment of being there. Like, who brings their kid to a cage fight? But like, who brings their kid to the presentation? But you know, and then like that dad totally looks like Smithers from The Simpsons. But I really got into it. And you know you've like hit it, you've gotten, forgive the pun, to hit it, but you've reached the apex of fighting sports when you can photograph two guys knocking each other out at the same time. And this had a lot of therapy for me. I felt I was shooting this constantly when Marvi was going through her own troubles. Like that was my therapy. Because you know, I know in South Africa you probably have socialist medical insurance. Like, it doesn't cost a lot. In the US, it costs a lot of money to like get mental health treatment. I don't know what it's like here. If like it really sucks or if it's really good.
I think it's like $200 a month for the standard.
Okay, yeah, we pay $2,500 a month. So yeah, it's expensive, and then you also have to pay costs on top of that when you go see a therapist. There's copay. It's really expensive. So we're like, she's gonna go to a therapist, and I'm just gonna get beaten up. And so that was, you know, and yeah, and it did really help. I'm not saying for my level of what was going through, like for PTSD, that getting beat up is good therapy. I wouldn't recommend that for everyone, but what it did was it gave me an in to do more sports photography. So when people saw my fighting work, they were like, you know, why don't you not do war zone work and we can get you some sports photography. I signed a contract with ESPN, and I started getting sports work from everyone because they were like, oh, sports, it's kind of like war photography. You know, there's the peak moment there, except they're not in any danger unless you get like hit by a ball or a puck or something. So I got sent to the Sochi Olympics in 2014, and the editor was like, just make art. It could be black and white, it could be art, you could do whatever you want, which is great. I didn't have deadlines, I didn't have to transmit, I didn't have to edit, I could just shoot whatever I wanted, and it was amazing. When you get that freedom, when someone trusts you to do that, and to make poetry out of sports, for a moment you're like, this is great! And then you're like, you make poetry out of sports. So there was a lot of like shooting through things and trying, you know, I had great advice from a photographer a long time ago, David Burnett, if you guys have heard of him. He was actually, when Nick Foot took the image of the little girl covered in napalm, he was standing right next to Nick Foot, changing a roll of film in his Leica, and missed the picture. Just as a case in point, but he's had a very long and storied career, more than Nick Good, and he's done a lot more things with what? He probably doesn't have one image that stands out in the same way, but he's done so much over the course of his career. And
you don't know who he is, you should look at him.
Yeah, David Menez. I mean, he you know, he was in Iran during the whole hostage crisis. He has all the most amazing pictures of. I mean, like, he's done so much. He does so much politics. He's done so much with the Olympics. He's like the first person to bring like a tilt shift lens into the White House, which blew everyone's mind. And so he gave me this advice. He's like, and this is how you make art out of hockey. This was the toughest one. Was like how to make art out of hockey. But he was like, wherever you see a bunch of photographers standing around to make an image, go someplace else. And ultimately, this is like the best advice I ever got. It fails you in a couple of places. So
So like everyone was shooting hockey, I was like, how can I make a good hockey picture? It's really hard. It's like I have a small camera, I'm not using the long lens stuff. I'm like looking for anything that I can do to do something different. Now, the ski jump is one of the hardest things that you could possibly shoot. It's an optical illusion, you're standing on stairs, they're coming here, they're floating, they're going down, it's different speeds. It messes with autofocus and it's at night. So it's really hard to do ski jump. And all the photographers stand on one side. So it's like, I'm gonna take David's advice and go underneath the actual lip of the ski jump. But all you really get is butts floating away from you into the night. So that didn't work. But then, there are times where you can find other avenues where I'm waiting in line to use the toilet because I really had to pee. And I just had an 800mm lens on my shoulder. Trying to pee while holding an 800mm lens is not great. But this happened. Like this was the best angle, was from the piss pipe. And I'm like trying to angle, not on my snow pants, and shoot this at the same time. So there's a scene with the aerials, and actually, I don't know which country this is, but so what happened was, I actually saw David Burnett. He was at the Olympics, and he was standing in a crowd of other photographers. I was like, oh, you're not taking your own advice. And this was aerial, so they go down this huge ramp and do a couple of jumps, flip over. And I was slope certified, so I was able to have crampons and an ice pick. And I was like, all these people are standing at the bottom waiting, so I'm gonna go someplace else. So I start climbing up the slope to get a different angle. And the Sochi Olympics were quite warm. Like, I was wearing shorts and snow boots, and I was sweating profusely. And they were constantly making artificial snow for all these events. And so I'm like climbing up, and the snow is melting, I'm sweating, and I'm wiping my sweat, and the snow, and I'm falling into the melting snow, and the snow is getting all over my camera lenses, and I'm taking my head cheese and the oil, and I'm wiping it on the camera lenses, and I look up, and all of a sudden, the lights became the fingers of God. Because I had wiped my nose grease and my sweat all over my camera lenses. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go with this. And I actually keep the filters now. When I have like a really good nose grease pattern on my UV filter, I keep that to like bring it back because these make really good streaks. And I've actually used it now in other, so accidents, happy accidents. My professor in college used to call it happy accidents. Shit happens and you just don't know that it's gonna be awesome. And so like nose grease on lens filters is awesome. One day I'll create a Lightroom preset for this. But for now, it's just different filters. And I started using it in other places. I actually ended up, a friend of mine and I ended up working for the US Olympic Committee, or not the US Olympic, the Olympic Committee, for the Save Wrestling campaign. To save wrestling when they, the Olympic Committee. That's what it was! Yes! The Olympic Committee. So, and we went around the world photographing like traditional wrestling techniques. And I would always, if there were good lights, I would always rub some nose grease. You know. But we did some other like weird wrestling events. So this is like, I'm like getting back into the fight stuff. And what we did was we wrestled first, and then we would photograph. Or he would write a story. And I don't know if that actually helped with access at all. But it was just fun to wrestle in different places with people. Except like Turkish oil wrestling, because the whole point of the game is to stick your hand down the opponent's pants. It's called a kisbet. So it's like, get them in the kisbet. And you have to, you know, and it makes images like this, where like two dudes, one guy's down his pants and the other guy's grimacing. This is the biggest, this particular weekend, it's like the biggest gay pride vacation spot in Turkey. Also, incidentally, so I was there, I was shooting for like, I think it was like Men's Health and like Out Magazine with the photographer next to me. We're both shooting the same thing. It was really kind of amazing. But then I went to India to do more traditional wrestling, where I wrestled first. Wrestling is interesting because it developed at the same time in two different places for two very different reasons. So it's the world's earliest sport, and it developed in Sudan, or kind of an area that was in Sudan, as a way for shepherds to kind of fight over whose flock was who, to have like conflict resolution. So like, this is my sheep, let's wrestle for it. Okay, if you win, it's your sheep or your calf. And it also developed in Greece as a way to train soldiers without actually them using weapons. So in Sudan, it grew as a conflict resolution sport, and in Greece it grew up as a conflict sport. And it's basically the same thing. And I felt it was an interesting way to end up documenting wrestling, coming from being a war photographer, because wrestling had a lot to do with war. And of course, like when you get to like Kushi wrestling, you have to go into a temple. And it's like this dirt that's been mixed with tea leaves and all kinds of stuff. And I said I was going to wrestle these guys, and they're like, oh yeah, okay. So you have to have the novice wrestlers put the loincloth on you. So when I made this image, I'm actually wearing the same loincloth. And I just don't show that because once you see me in a loincloth, you can't unsee me in a loincloth. And I want to leave a little mystery for everyone here. But needless to say, when you get to the temple, though, it's an 8-year-old who's like the novice wrestlers, the new guys. They're the ones who put like the loincloth on for you. So they strip you naked. And I'm standing there, and the 8-year-old comes up to me and is like, it's just like a strip of cloth. And they like tuck you in and like push you back, manipulate you and like twirl the cloth around, like sticking my foot up here and it gets around and they do the other one. It's awkward a little bit, a lot of it. And then everything's good, and then I'm ready to wrestle, and they're like, oh, you guys have really good protein in America. I was like, yeah, it's like, you can fight this guy. And they gave a guy who had 30 kilos on me. Giant man. It was this guy, it was this dude who, like, literally, for 9 minutes, threw me around. I could not feel my neck for 5 days. Like, I couldn't move it. I was like this. And I'd shoot, and I'd turn, and I'd be like this. I'd be getting massages wherever possible, which is also not a good idea in India, but it's another story. But it was a lot of fun to do wrestling. But the idea that I got access to really interesting places because I was wrestling, because I was becoming part of the community and putting my camera down for a moment was important. And so this is like at 5 a.m. as light is trickling in, and I'm inside the temple with all the wrestlers inside the pit, which you're not allowed to do unless you're a wrestler. I don't have cauliflower ears yet, but that's probably going to come sooner rather than later. Meanwhile.
So while Ben was traveling around the world, doing all these fun things, I got knocked out. It was a case of
partially my fault.
Wine one day, and no, it was the first one was Barack Obama. We were celebrating because we had the first.
It was a very cold inauguration.
Very happy.
The inauguration was a very cold day. It was 12 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that translates.
We were very happy that Barack Obama was our president, and we celebrated. Needless to say, 9 months later, 10 months really, they don't tell you, it's really 10 years, that Mateo was born. And because that switch had flipped in me, because I had depression when my dad died, I was more prone to have it again. And I had really severe postpartum depression, which again is not even the same. It doesn't feel the same. And so these were emotions that I was not familiar with. Again, on top of that, I had a husband who was never there.
There's sometimes.
And I had a kid in a country that treated parenting in a very insular way. It's not communal. It's not the way I grew up in the Philippines, where everyone helps everyone. You can leave the kids with the neighbors. You can leave it. You have cousins living in your house. It wasn't like that. It's very insular in the U.S. It's a very individualistic culture. You shouldn't really ask because you're imposing. So I was alone, and that made my postpartum depression even worse. And so, because I had, like I mentioned before, I started this organization, Photography and Mental Health called 120, because I had done that, and because I had discovered that you can share your stories with a community, I decided to really not only document my own experience as a mother, but I also shared it online. So it was a very raw take on motherhood for me. It wasn't like the happy mom, happy kid. Like, this is what playtime. Playtime was dark for me. You know, like Captain America.
Captain Iron.
Captain America, no, and Wolverine, and Caleb was not a fun scene. Like, nap time was very gloomy, and everything was really hazy. My world was hazy at that time, and a lot of it too was because when you have kids and you don't have help, you don't sleep. So I pretty much had like 1 to 2 hours of sleep, you know, every day for a good 6 months at that time. And I would just photograph everything that was happening to me. Again, this was a very silent. If you notice my images, you notice how silent they are, and I am silent myself. My world was very silent. Even bath time, you can see, like, was lonely. That is bad.
So I was there for
He
something.
was there for that, but most of the time, for a lot of the hospitalizations, I was alone. So it's very hard to go through the anxiety without anyone else absorbing that. I remember Mateo had a 10-day fever when he was only a year old, and I went through that on my own. And it really rocked our marriage. And I documented it. Even when Ben broke down in the middle of us fighting, I was like, hold up, let me take a photo. And I documented, again, like, I am obsessively documenting my life, and I think part of it too is because I always look back at these images and kind of figure out what went wrong, how could I have done it better, what could I change in the future. And there were moments, this was the moment that I realized where we was when he was on his bed and he took his last breath, and I heard my husband wail, and I had never seen Ben wail before. I've seen Ben scared once when I was giving birth to Mateo. That was the first time I ever saw him, fear in him. And then I've never seen Ben really wail. And then Ben wailed, and I realized that the reason why Wheat wasn't with me is because Wheat was with Ben. And I felt guilty because it wasn't until his last breath that I said, thank you. And I felt really, it was a very painful moment, but I documented it anyway. It was a very hard day for my son, Mateo, because Mateo and Caleb have grown up, have only known these dogs their entire lives. Our dogs are actually older than our kids. So they've only known these animals their whole lives. And I was trying to figure out, during this whole documentation process, like, how you parent. How do you parent when the child says, Mommy, I don't want you to die? Because I don't want it. Mommy, I don't want to die, because if I die, my eyes will die. And if my eyes die, I'll no longer see you. And when I no longer see you, I'll forget you, and if I forget you, I'll stop loving you. And I don't want to stop loving you, Mommy. And I'm listening to my son, and I'm like, hold on, I'm going to take a photo of that. But again, I was like obsessively documenting these moments because I was sharing it to the community and asking people, how do you do this? Like, how there's no textbook for all of this. We don't have much time, but we only have like 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, you're more emotional down.
Yeah, that's that.
Well, okay, so we were going through all this, and at the same time, I was trying to figure out how to be more present dad. Like Natgeo, for the entire first year of his life, when he started talking, he called every computer screen he saw the "Hello, Daddy."
He saw Skype. Skype they called Hello Daddy.
Hello, Daddy. Yeah, but it was Skype. It was TVs. It was anything. It was like, right? Because I wasn't there. I was traveling. I was like, you know, we're freelancers. Like, how do you make money when one person can't work anymore? It's like I had to take so much on myself that I was trying to figure out what else I could do. And just because I didn't want to do warzone work, I thought to myself, like, my kids are young, and I don't remember anything from when I was like 2, 3, or 4 years old. So if I die now in the war zone, they're never going to remember me. So I wanted to figure out what else I could do. And I was like, oh, I'm a big, burly person. I could do adventure photography. And I started doing, just offhand, trying to do adventure photography. I ended up in Iceland, actually on assignment, not like all the other New Yorkers who were in Iceland, who were actually more than, there are more people not from Iceland in Iceland than Icelanders, because it's like, oh, I'm going to go photograph the Sungenfrossen doctor, whatever it's called. But I did that. I actually went to track pumas all the way down to Antarctica and covered myself in baby puma feces to get a kill. That was awesome. And really got into it and used some lessons that I learned from Iraq, actually, that animals see a camera as an unblinking eye that's always threatening them for dominance, and so you have to blink your camera. When I was down into this room, I actually blinked my camera and she walked right past me. But I started getting, to take, again, it's about taking advantage of assignments. And what we were going through and what our marriage was going through, we hadn't figured out. And so I was just burying myself in work and taking every opportunity to make more work, to make other opportunities, other jobs, to make more money and pay for the kids, and it was just like a continuous cycle of just trying to find work, pay for work, to do more work. And it was wearing me down, but at the same time, it was giving me opportunities. So I had an assignment for the New York Times Magazine to shoot like illegal fishing in Palau. And I ended up I didn't know, it was 2015, I didn't know how to swim underwater. I'm an underwater photographer now, but I taught myself, and I was like, oh, I should photograph Jellyfish Lake, which they're all dead now. But now you can't go back to Jellyfish Lake because they're dead. But at the time, I was like, oh, I should shoot this, and I'm using a tiny Sony point-and-shoot camera in a housing, because I didn't own anything yet, and I made this image. And the New York Times liked it so much, they were like, oh, we have like $8,000 left in our fiscal year-end budget. What do you want to do? And I was like, great white sharks. It was like my first thing. So my first underwater assignment was actually to shoot great whites. That's what I'm saying. If you're going to do war, do war. If you're going to do underwater, you can go for the big boys. And so this is actually Persephone. She's the third biggest great white shark ever recorded in the Pacific. And that's with a 12 millimeter lens or an 11. So pretty close to her. She's giant. Marvi and I went to Cuba and I wouldn't get in the water with a crocodile until after you feed it 10 raw chickens. So this is actually 10 raw chickens, and actually this is a piece of the brine that's kind of like hanging. After the 10th chicken, we were like, it's fine to get in the water now. It's good. No, please, you, Marvi, you're driving. No.
Okay, so again, I forgot to mention this, that when I got pregnant and had kids, I quit photography. That experience that I had in 2008 with being depressed and then getting pregnant and having kids really kind of was a big upheaval. And photojournalism just didn't feel relatable to me. It didn't feel like it was a goal in my life anymore. So I quit. I even sold all my cameras. So all those photos that you saw, those were all iPhone cameras. All the black and white photos. And I was running this organization, 1 in 20, which was kind of like occupying my life. And I ran the office. I ran Ben's business. Ben was just Ben Lowy at the time. We were at Lowy Lacar. And I was kind of hating myself because I was like, I did not move to New York City to be Ben's secretary, you know, but that was kind of where I was at while I was raising the kids. So I just kept on documenting. But at some point with, you know, the right medical support, thankfully we had insurance, and the right support in my family, I got better. I started seeing light again. My kids started talking. And I started realizing that they were kind of really cute and funny individuals. And we would have these conversations that I would document. And
They're good ones.
they're really funny. The last one was, Dad is a vagina, a penis with a pocket. And then of course Ben goes, no, they're
pockets for penises.
They're pockets for penises.
Makes sense.
So this is how we parent. We have a lot of parenting fails. And you know, like bath time wasn't as lonely anymore. I even embraced, you know, the cheesy yearbook photos, and I was now that mom who liked cheesy yearbook photos. I was no longer the brooding artist that I thought I was. I started seeing my husband again, both as a father and just as a husband. And I started seeing color again. I started seeing light, I started seeing color. And, you know, the realities about my illness didn't weigh me down. Again, this is going back to the part where I said, just don't hold any judgment when it comes to yourself, whether it's your weakness or your strength, just take it as it is. And so I learned to do that. If it was something that I didn't like about myself, I wasn't hard on myself. I just said, I'll either work on it or that's just who I am. Take it or leave it. I pretty much say that to them all the time. That's who I am. And so this was one of those turning points for me. Ben came to me and said, Marvi, he was a Sony artisan at that time. I wasn't yet because I was still working in the office. He said, Marvi, Sony wants me to do, they have these new 4K cameras. And they want me to do this film about the 4K cameras. Can you help me? And I said, and I took this as an opportunity for myself to get back in the field. So I said, let me write a pitch. And I wrote a pitch for 2 stories, one in Cuba and one to go back to the Philippines. And I said, let's do this together. Because Ben's idea was like his photos, like 1990s, you know, like his photos.
That was not my idea. I didn't even
Okay,
write
you didn't
that.
have an idea.
You always talk my stuff down.
So, but I was like, let's do this. Let's do this right. Not just like videos and music. Like, let's actually make a narrative. So I wrote a pitch to Sony. I had a script already written down.
I wrote a lot of that also. I just want to,
You write me out of this
Anyway,
whole thing.
okay. So I sent it to Kayla, and at 9 o'clock, and by 1 o'clock, how can you even write it? You weren't even
I
reading
was
it.
saying, I was completing
Not-
the whole thing, oh my god.
Okay, anyway. I sent the script to Kayla, and by 1 o'clock it was approved. And so the first pitch was, these are, I mean, a lot of this were interviews from him, so they're essentially his words. I just put it together. So this was Legacy 1 and Legacy 2. Legacy 2 was when we took our kids and introduced them to my country of birth.
Hey, Pal.
Hey, Daddy.
How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I get going about
What you going this time?
I gotta go photo some sharks.
For real?
Yeah. See you soon.
See you soon.
It doesn't matter if I'm on assignment in Afghanistan or filming underwater in Mexico. To my boys, it all equals that I'm gone. That's something I have to grapple with every day. Being a photographer is about following my vision wherever it takes me. It's about chasing these brilliant, fleeting moments. It's about trying to capture 1,000 different voices and lives in a single frame. But self-expression can be selfish. Being a parent is the exact opposite. Parenthood is about being dedicated to something other than myself. Wherever I go, I promise them three things. I'll be home soon, I'll call them every night, and I'll bring them back something unique. My grandparents escaped war, and I grew up hearing so many stories of unthinkable cruelty, but also about the will to survive. My first assignments as a professional photographer were in heavy conflict zones. When my children were born, it changed me. I know everyone says that, but I started to seek out more of the beauty, not just the horror in the world. I still want to bear witness to all these stories, but I also want to explore color, texture, and rhythm. I want to bring the skies of another hemisphere home to my kids. I want to push my limits when I'm out there, but at the same time, I want to come home. I want to come home and say, look at this piece of the world I brought back for you. Not too many people get to see so much of the world, to witness such momentous events, dive, to climb, to get lost in places so far away that some people don't even know that they exist, to swim with these creatures who share this world with us. I hope one day I can take the boys with me to some of these places. I wonder what they'll see that I never saw before. I wonder how their world will unfold. I've been a photographer a lot longer than I've been a dad, but I'm quickly realizing that it's not what I leave behind for the world to see, but how I teach my sons to see the world.
And so that was a big turning point for me because I realized that we can do this. We can do this as a family. I can go back and direct, and I can actually stomach working with.
How many people shot that? Was it just you two?
Just us.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so we actually now have sort of made this name for ourselves where I guess it's almost sort of like running and gunning, where we do a lot of video productions for different clients where it's just us. Well, mostly it's her yelling at me and telling me what to do. But it's just as a team, it's just us. Like I carry stuff and she kind of tells me where to put it down. Yeah. It's like I have all the like ND filter pouches and cameras. And she like says do this and I like put it on here. But and then, you know, we started including our kids. And yeah, we still do big productions. Like we've worked on commercials where we have like a 50-person union crew and line producers and like, you know, if there's a soda can here on the table, I have to like tell someone to move it if it's in my shot. Like in the States, like I'm not allowed to move it. I don't know if you have that here, but like if I'm on a shoot, like a big commercial shoot, I'm not allowed to touch that. I have to tell someone to touch it, to take it out. Because, you know,
but essentially these short films that we made served as a reel, and so that's when we started getting advertising jobs.
And using our children.
Yeah, and again we were lucky because literally the first advertising job we got was a national commercial. And again, it's another one of those stories where it gets really lucky. You know, we were very ballsy. We went into the agency and introduced ourselves.
You just told me to
cursed them a lot. You know, like just joke around a lot. And they were like, "Do you guys want to do this?" They brought us in for the behind-the-scenes stills. They met us and they were like, "Do you guys want to do the national commercial?" We had no directing experience at all. We only have the Sony mirrorless cameras as our video. Oh, Canons at that time.
Yeah,
we only had the
before
cameras
we
at that
even-
time.
before we even
had. And they hired us to do that entire campaign, and the production company decided to rep us after that. They liked our work enough that we
And
had a rep.
personality
It's one of
is
those
important.
things, personality is important. One of those things where we didn't have a reel, we didn't have a history of being directors, but then we got repped by a production company. But because a lot of it too is that, you know, you have to know this in any industry, no one's going to want to work with an asshole. So if you're difficult and if you're kind of a diva, no matter how talented you are, you know, there will be jobs that will get lost.
But so we started doing a lot more fun work and involving our kids in it And
Well, Ben really discovered underwater, and he was like, Marvi, I really want to do this. And I realized that motherhood had changed me. And I didn't want to really leave the kids. And you know, the kids are used to me. And so when I leave for these advertising jobs, it really shakes it up.
so our kids are all with us when we're shooting these interviews. So like we taught Natgeo, our 8-year-old, how to swim. There are pros and cons. Teaching an 8-year-old how to scuba dive, but and so he's with us, and we want to show him the world. And so we're like, well, that's crazy. We went from photojournalism, showing other people the world, and to doing advertising and saying, hey, why don't we actually show our kids the world? And that's like maybe where the future lies for us.
So I just want to talk to them about how this happened.
Yeah.
So, you know, Ben came to me and was like, really, Marvi, I really want to figure out how to do this underwater and adventure thing, because I am the happiest when I'm doing this. And I'm always like the fixer, right? Whenever someone comes to me with a problem, I want to figure out the solution for that. And my issue was I didn't want to leave the kids behind for too long on assignments, which is one of the reasons why I left photojournalism, was because there was no return on investment. You know, you get paid so little for being away from the kids for so much. You end up paying the nanny and you end up with like $100 at the end. So there was no return on investment.
Well, there's no return on investment in general from doing editorial photojournalism.
Yeah. And so there was this idea, you know, that like I was like, hey Ben, why don't we do this idea of, you know, our kids, I don't know if you've seen my Instagram, it's called Bone Tired Mama. My personal Instagram is called Bone Tired Mama, where I just document these moments with my kids, and they have a lot of questions. You know, like, is the vagina on pocket 13? Or like, is it going to happen here on school shootings?
But also other light ones like Dad, I want to go to Jew school, so I know how to split the Red Sea.
You know, so I would document
really
those. I would document those comments, but then it became this body of work, and people were recognizing it as a body of work. And I said, how about we put it together? You know, your adventure work and, you know, the kids' questions, and put it into a show. And so I was like, let me write a pitch for a TV show. When I wrote the pitch for a TV show, I had Google Slides on one tab, and another tab that says how to write a TV show, how to write a pitch for a TV show. And I found out that we needed to make a reel, a sizzle reel. They call it a sizzle reel. And so I was like, and Ben was like, I really want to go do sharks. And I was like, can we make the sizzle reel while you go do sharks? It involves the kids, so you got to figure out how to, you know, take the kids there. And so Ben came up with the sponsorship from Sony, or no,
from budget.
Oh yeah. So Ben's really good at getting sponsorships.
I'm good at talking. I prostitute myself to companies. Again, another really good way is like finding companies that want to be part of what you're doing. So like while we have this overarching thing of like family and visiting places and not looking at the worst parts of the world but at the best, you know, that's something that more brands can swallow. And so because today, a lot of the creative that you're making are you have to deal with brands. And you're not going to want to find, there's no brands that want to do bad news. Like when Google Glasses came out, I was like, hey guys, let's put Google Glasses on every soldier in Afghanistan, and you could have like, it would be like POV of like Call of Duty, and then they're like, yeah, what if someone dies? And then you have a video of it live streaming, and you're like, oh, that's not good for our brand. But then you find something that people want, that makes people happy, and then you figure out like, how does that work with what we want to do? And so we kind of had like a multi-stage approach where, you know, to run an effective business, and this is any business, you have to have a plan. You can't just be like, I'm a freelancer and I'm going to play it by ear. It's like we meet every quarter and we like figure out how much money we have to allocate to this, to marketing, to ideas. You know, we have giant dry erase boards in our office and we write stuff down about like how we're going to approach this. And ultimately our idea is to get our two kids eaten by sharks.
To make a sizzle reel, basically. We were like, we need to make a sizzle reel, and and for this TV show pitch that I was writing. And,
where they would get eaten by sharks.
And so Ben got some sponsorship, and we found ourselves in Mexico.
Right, and first, before we get them in with the sharks, we have to teach them how to scuba dive. So, again, it's a multi-stage thing where we started a project now of the questions our kids ask, and why they ask them. So I will say also this is like our entire house is wired with like mics and cameras to like record silly things our kids say so we can put them to shows later on.
Okay.
But so this is the first part of where.
So basically it was like 10 minutes. I would Ben take them down to the pool and let me write the script. And we were already in Mexico when I wrote this, and we storyboarded it while we were going into the ocean.
Mom, how can we kill sharks? Do we kill them sharks? Why do people eat sharks? Like how big can we kill it for sport on purpose? How does your mom?
They ask us all these questions.
And we could talk to them about all the problems.
Global warming, bleached coral,
Rising waters,
mass extinction,
pollution.
and it's overwhelming.
It makes me feel sad that people kill animals that are in the sea. People littering the ocean, killing every single animal.
But when they're in the water, their excitement washes away our despair.
And we hope that with every experience we give them, that they are driven to cherish the ocean, to cherish life, and to be part of the solution. Because this generation, these children,
They are the embodiment of hope.
I was probably to sea lions, you know that?
You wish you were sea lion?
Yeah. They're beautiful.
I agree.
So this is the last slide actually, but I wanted to talk to you about two things: serendipity and opportunism. Because
Opportunism?
because we're being opportunistic.
No.
So because we made this for the TV show,
To eventually feed our kids to sharks.
but I don't know where you were. You were in a car. You called me, and they were like, "Did you know that National Geographic? Did you know that National Geographic has a contest, and it's about wild animals, or something about nature and people?" And he was like, "You should enter this." And I was like, "Ben, I'm still working with the editor. We haven't even done a color pass or a sound pass." And he was like, "It's due at 5. So I called the editor at 1, and I was like, "Can we just do like just a quick color pass and a quick sound pass? Give it to me by 3, and I have to enter it for this contest." So I entered it, and I forgot about it. And then 2 weeks later, we got a call saying that that we were one of the top 3 finalists for this National Geographic contest. And we went, they flew us to this film festival, and we won. And again, this is where, being opportunistic, like not in a sleazy kind of way, but
No,
just taking those opportunities.
taking advantage of the things that go your way. So we were able to.
So when we went there, I'm walking. So
I was sharing.
So when we went there, and this guy who's the head of the VP of Geographic was like, "I really love your work," and I had looked him up before that. He was like, "I can't," the prize was to send the winner to somewhere in Africa on a safari. And I was like, "Well, guess what? I already have a pitch." So I sent them the pitch. We sent them the pitch, and we were like,
she puts in me now.
We sent them the pitch.
Yeah.
Because I literally was the one who hit send. So we sent them the pitch, and they were like, "How about we send your whole family?"
But before that, actually this summer, just on the idea that we have that for National Geographic, we did going into the sharks, and that's being edited right now. Where
both kids who know how to swim, and they went into the cage with great whites, and we filmed them. So that whole part of the show of them kind of, they didn't get eaten because they're there, but so they went in with great whites while we filmed them, and now just 2 weeks ago we filmed them going on safari where they're actually filming, and this idea of like the kids' perspective of animals, nature, conservation, and we sold that whole idea to National Geographic, where we're going to be doing a show now on kind of like the heavier stuff where we shot pilot episodes, where we've done shows on like school shootings in the U.S. and race.
Not for Geographic,
but yeah, they're not going to do those. So we actually, again, it's about branding. Saying, okay, we know that Geographic, it's not going to deal with those heavier issues that have like more political meaning. Where we photographed our kids, going on like anti-gun marches and like going through code reds. And there's code red in the U.S. is where they lock down the school because there's a shooter inside. And we never had to do that growing up in the
but
U.S.
But our children, even from pre-K, when Caleb was 4, was his first lockdown drill.
So we've been filming, but that stuff doesn't go to Geographic. But the things like Caleb is having a debate with our guide about who's faster, Cheetah or the Flash.
Right.
And
we're gonna end up pitching that to Natgeo Kids. But because we wrote the pitch, because the pitch was written, because we had the sizzle reel, because we have all those other reels that we did for other companies like Sony, we got optioned. And again, this is one of those things that one thing will lead to the other, right? Like a lot of these things we did for ourselves because we wanted a TV show, so we wrote a pitch instead of waiting for someone to write the pitch, or instead of just going up to someone and telling them. We actually did the work to show them that we could do it, and then we got optioned.
Yeah, so we're now represented by a production company in Hollywood, sort of thing.
By a production company, and that's what and we actually just got called by Honda for their electric car company to find out if we can get in a car with our kids and just
for like a year and just drive around the U.S. and film them.
So we don't know if this is going to happen, but again, like these are opportunities that we get, and it really depends on how we take them.
All us make our own chances based on the work we do and like the opportunities you take, and that's how people find it. It's not necessarily about like the followers you have on Instagram or like how you're an influencer. It's the legacy of your work more than anything else. Is like if you have a pretty picture on Instagram, there are tons of pretty pictures on Instagram, and like people can take photos from now to tomorrow. Like my mom has an iPhone and photographs her garden. You probably can photograph 1,000 pictures of a flower. One of them is going to be amazing. I mean, just the process, like the chances of it, it's going to be great, right? So everyone can take one good image, and the thing is, where you stand the test of time is where you create a legacy of work, where it's not just one image, it's a body of work, it's something consistent, and that is showing, everything that you're about.
And don't think that these tiny things you do won't lead to something, because again, like you've seen, there's always a thread, right? Like even me writing in the sideboard, the quotes led to the body of work on Voltaire and Mama, and those quotes and those questions led to this TV show pitch. And so one thing will always lead to the other. Making the sizzle reel brought us, incidentally, the National Geographic win, but because we had already had the pitch written, we were able to just go to the VP of Geographic World and say, how about you send the entire family to make something like this? So it always pays to constantly be thinking.
And also kids are basically free models that you can use at any time.
It was really long. We want to answer your questions.
If you have any questions, or have I answered, and Marvi, we've answered everything you can possibly ask.
I want to know, Marvi, how you dealt with them being away at war before you even had kids. Did you look at it as he's a photographer, I understand as I'm a photographer?
Yes.
Or did it upset you?
No. No. And I also took out an insurance.
Life insurance. She still has it. Well, we had a deal. We had a thing because when that soldier died, he was looking at Iron Man. We had looked at that Iron Man trailer, and actually, when we were driving out, there were 12 of us crammed into one Humvee, which is a Humvee is made for 5 people. There were 12 of us crammed in, and I was sitting behind the driver and realizing that I could like die at any second from another bomb blast, and I was like, I didn't think of Marvi or the dogs because we haven't had kids yet, and I was like, I just can't die before I see that stupid Iron Man movie because I just saw the trailer, and it took like 10 minutes to download with the satellite dish, and it ended up becoming a tradition that when I went away to war, we would pick out the next big Marvel blockbuster movie, and we wouldn't see it till I got back. And like if we didn't see it, then that meant I would come back because we would be able to see it. And like I wouldn't, it became like our superstition, you know.
I mean, we were in a relationship, obviously, and we were married, but in a way we led somewhat parallel lives. Like I understood myself outside of him. It's very hard to do that when you have kids because they see us as a unit. I mean, I still see myself as a Marvi, but the kids see us as a unit. And so it's really hard to go back into the old way of thinking and say, you know, he is independent and can have his own decisions. And by the time you have kids, you have to be like, well, shit, I don't want to be left alone with, you know, these 2 boys.
And I only went back to war like maybe twice after we had kids, and one of them was Libya, and 2 of our friends were killed, and it was very close to happening to me, and basically I left Libya because Marvi got into a car accident while she was pregnant with our youngest son, and I went back, and a few days later, the people I was traveling with were killed, and actually our son's godfather was really badly injured. And Marvi went into labor right after the memorial service of one of our friends who was killed. And Caleb, our youngest, was actually born that next day, which incidentally happened to be when Robert Capa died, his death anniversary. We were like, Jesus, this is a lot of omens right now. And so like, we kind of called it right there and saying, I'm done with Warzone work. And
it wasn't that easy. There was a
it
lot of
I mean, it was really hard.
There was a lot of therapy and intervention for that to happen. Do you see this?
No. I think it's important work. And like with the animal stuff and underwater, I get my fix of sort of this need to be out there, to do something different than being an accountant. Or, you know, I fucked this over too many times, but I'd say it's important. It's important to do Warzone work, but I also think like so much of the narrative of photojournalism and documenting war is based on this, on a few misnomers. It's like a very Western approach to, yeah. Would you let me talk and I'll let you talk. But misconception is fine. It's like it's very westernized. It's like I'm going to come out with a book and get into Magnum sort of thing. It has this really kind of Europe American perspective of war and being famous for shooting war and publishing books, and I don't miss that. And like who gets the awards from World Press? Like that part of it. It took a long time for me to come to grips with like that's not important. And that part of it I don't miss. Do I think that like there's no one covering Iraq or Afghanistan anymore, and the only people who can afford to be sent there are wire services, and it takes a whole other thing out of it because it's too dangerous, and I mean there's just no money in it. That's a problem that needs to change, but am I going to run back because I miss it that much? No, because I think somebody asked me once why I shot conflict, and I said because someone has to shoot like the ugly parts of the world. But recently, there's also 50% of the world that's awesome, And I remember when Marvi and I were in the Philippines, and we were surrounded by 10 whale sharks. And we spent 6 days with the same whale sharks coming in every day and just swimming around. And I looked at her and was like, I could do this forever. It was amazing. And there wasn't any conflict. Yeah, Natgeo was with us. There was no conflict there. There was no story that would change the world. There was just an awesome experience. And I think those are also legitimate and awesome things to document.
But also I think parenting really changed the way we looked at storytelling. Because a lot of it too is introducing our kids to the stories that we bring home. And we do want to talk to them about war and the injustice and inequality in the world, but there's so much to teach them.
There are other things too.
In a very different way. It doesn't need to be that jarring.
It's not to say that we don't do other things. Like we covered the Trump and Hillary Clinton presidential campaign. I did that, but like opioids in America. Like there are photojournalism stories that we do that aren't as dangerous as getting shot at. And right now, my body armor I use in the gym. I wear it when I do a Stairmaster. It's an extra weight. Gets weird looks.
Does anyone else have any questions? Really, we're an open book. There is no question that's too personal, clearly for us.
Is there any times where you actually just put down the camera and just enjoy it?
Yeah.
That inner conflict quite a bit sometimes.
Sunsets, for sure. So, has anyone read Susan Sontag on photography? I said it right. That's what I just said. She said don't. Again, if you're reading it, it's a very Western perspective of photography. But one of the things, and it wouldn't be super PC to say, but this book was written a long time ago. She wrote, "Don't fall into Japanese tourist syndrome," which is kind of everyone tourist syndrome now. We were at today. We went to the
yesterday we
Cape
went
of Good Hope Point, Cape, whatever. And no one was actually looking at it. They were all photographing themselves at it. And it's the same with sunsets. There's a brilliant sunset, and people take a photo of it, and they never actually see it with their own eyes. Last year, I had to go photograph. I was lucky enough to be asked to photograph the SpaceX launch, and I had all these cameras. So I have never shot with that many cameras. That sound-activated modules, and I have all these Sony cameras set up underneath the rocket, and then I'm standing 4 miles away. And I had another camera branching out from my camera, and another camera over here. I shot just every camera, and rocket takes off, it's super cool, and it lands again. And I never saw it with my eyes. The entire time, I felt it because when the rocket takes off, even if you're 3 miles away, you feel it. It's that powerful, right? I never saw it. Never ever saw it. And that is disheartening. When we went down with the sharks, there was definitely a time where we were no cameras.
Yeah.
Let's actually do this.
Well, we actually end up having to build a day where we're not shooting, and that's what we have to do.
So even last week when we were on safari, we took one day where we were
just with the
no
kids
cameras.
And
that's when you see the two lions mating. And they were I did bring your camera. True story.
Even some moments, we went to Robben Island, and I was really looking forward to that, to introduce that to the kids. And it was just really weird when people were taking selfies of themselves and smiling, and those are just the moments that you're kind of okay, this is. Cameras are just too much. We should just be taking notes.
No, and sometimes we definitely think about that. You have to put it down. And then there are times when you're why did I not have a camera with me then?
Oh, we always have cameras with us. That's a big mistake to not have cameras with you. Yeah. We always have a camera with us, but we just...
there are times Natgeo will be you just are photographing me for the likes. And it's so stingy. It's so stingy. Every time he says it, it's you're just posting me on Instagram because you want to use me. No. But he means it.
We actually said that there at Cape Good.
Yeah.
It's like, you're posting this for the likes.
Yes, but you know.
Anyone else have any questions?
You guys have any mid to long term aspirations to enter, let's call it, the fine art world of photography? You know, exhibition work, investment art. Because obviously you see a lot, and you've got an opportunity to have an impressionistic approach to some of the work that you shoot that's maybe not commercial or not for a client. You know, you've got such an opportunity to produce a long-term body of work of not necessarily financial value, but personal, really personal work that's more art inclined.
That's one, how Ben
One,
said that we put goals, we meet at the beginning of the year after January 1st, and we say, what are our goals this year? That has been kids and just trying to make mortgage and all the financial obligations we have at this point. That's certainly been
It's
in
there,
the
but it's,
bottom of our.
I would say this, like, when you're an editorial photographer, you're marketing yourself as being able to take your vision and apply it to your client, the magazine, and they trust that you have a way where you're going to represent a story that hasn't been written yet, but that they want you to cover. And when you're an advertising photographer, you're representing yourself as a monkey that is just going to, do a trained monkey that's going to do whatever the client wants, and you don't really have a voice. You're just doing something exactly as they've wanted in a story. And then when you're an art photographer, you have to represent yourself as a completely different personality, as something free of all the other distractions.
Non-conformist.
Right, and I think to be all three at the same time and to represent yourself as those three personalities at the same time is very, very hard.
Yeah, it's almost like saying shooting video and photo at the same time. It's just different parts of your brain. And I think when it comes to fine art, that may be something in our future, but we don't have the bandwidth for that.
Yeah, like right now, we have our earlier work has definitely been exhibited, and we've sold prints, and we've had lots of different shows in different places. But when we made the switch to doing kind of like more adventure work and underwater work, that kind of, I'm not in a hurry to publish a book on sharks. Like, it doesn't have a narrative concept from point A to point B. I think if anything, Marvi's work with the kids and the quotes kind of going together has a space in that world.
But that, I see that as one big body of work that I will finish. I have, like, my vision for that work on generational trauma is something that Natgeo would, not that I plan on traumatizing him, but I feel like, he will take that on after I die, and that would be the body of work, and that would be like,
but if you want to buy any of our prints, if anyone wants to buy prints. You really need the bandwidth for that, because a lot of fine art work is really thinking and conceptualizing, and we don't have the time for that. When you have kids like yelling constantly, and then you have to think about, how to run the business, and then when do we have to pick up the kids after you think about running a business? Like, fine art is just not a space that we can delve into. At least in the concept part of it. I mean, if it comes from, we have several projects that we've continued on and off for the last few years as sort of like our crutches in a way, where like the concept is already there and we can keep on making the images, but it's not necessarily anything new. And it's more because we just need to create. And I think it's always good is like to constantly fulfill this need to create, but we're not selling it as art, as more as it's an avenue for self-expression to just keep on investigating what.
Yeah, we're not looking for a gallery, basically.
Yeah.
We're not looking.
I would love to be a gallery.
Because the minute you start shooting it with intent, it's no longer art. I mean, in theory, because now it becomes a commercialized project.
Well, yeah, I mean, art with a capital A is art because it's not in the reach of the masses, and I mean, there's a whole different way you can think about it. It's like, are the pictures that hang up in a hotel art?
But also,
but also those pictures are awesome and sell really well when you have like a hotel photo agent, So it's.
But also, I don't think that that's also also our personalities. I really like the idea of it being relatable to not like this elite group of gallerists and art aficionados. You know, that's never been who I am. And I don't think Ben has been either.
I mean, there was one point when, I don't know if you remember, in like the early 2000s, there was a trend to have like blurry black and white pictures in photojournalism.
And tilting frame.
And like a tilted frame. And like, I actually did a project that won an award, and the whole time I just did a blurred, it was like blurry black and white. And I remember talking about it, I was like, I'm gonna shoot this blurry in black and white.
Yeah, but
it was like, nothing was higher than a 15th of a second, and I'm like doing this, and they're like, this is amazing, and it's masterful. I was like, it's total bullshit.
So I like it. You have to be also in the space to really be at that. I don't personally think it's my work. I do believe that my body of work on generational trauma will be eventually a body of work, but not because I want it to be in the art world, but it's because I want it to just be out there for everyone and share. Because I do feel like, one of the biggest most significant moments for me was when I was 2. One was someone I knew, and they said, "Your work makes me feel like I'm no longer an anomaly." So that was really important, and that was the impetus for me showing that work to the world. And then another one was when I was in Sydney at the Head-On Photo Festival, and I had a gallery show there, and the next day after the opening, someone came up to me, we were at the restaurant, and they were like, "Are you Marvi Lacar?" Like, yeah. It's like, your work was at this gallery. I just want to tell you that I've never understood what it meant when people say it changed my life, but that changed my life because yesterday was the first day I told someone that I am going through depression, and this is a doctor. This guy is a doctor. That I am going through depression. That was the first day I ever said those words. And then when I go back to Melbourne, I'm going to seek therapy. It's never been my intent for that work to live within this space of a gallery. It's always been to just share it with as many people as possible.
You guys both started off as photographers and now you've gone into photography. How much of it was the pressures of, the work space that we were heading into, or was it that you actually wanted to?
I think it was very serendipitous. It was just we got hired for it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, on this recent trip where we were on safari, I was shooting all the video, and Marvi was shooting the stills and video. And I can't tell you how hard it was to just shoot video, because I still love stills.
Yeah.
And video is a different way of thinking. I mean, composition is still the same. You have to hold the shot a little bit longer. I like it, but I don't love it as much as I do stills. When you freeze that moment and you train for that, your eye and everything, your whole existence, it's really hard. And so I don't love video yet as much as stills, but I recognize that is something that we really have to have in our repertoire, yes, because of the way the markets are changing, because of our iPhones and the way people consume information. Will stills even exist in another 10 years? Like, I actually think science fiction movies are like a really good way to gauge how people think the world's going to change. And okay, Minority Report was not a good movie, but if you just look at it from the base, like Philip K. Dick really understood how people consume things. And like, if you look at it, like Tom Cruise walks into the Gap in the movie and like scans his eyeball and shows different clothes that he was wearing, and the newspapers are all moving images and everything is moving. And that's really kind of like the augmented reality future we're all going to inhabit, and probably a lot sooner than whatever year that movie's supposed to take place in, because, I mean, it's happening right now. Like, my brother runs a marketing firm, and they geofence ads for people, which means, like, if you're in this room, you will see an ad on your phone, but if you step outside it, you won't. Like, he does that for companies. Like, all of that exists now already, where Getty Images, where we dumped all our stock, like, they give away images
images for free now to blogs, as long as the blog gives them access to the IP addresses of everyone that looks at that blog, so that they can sell information to them, right? So the whole world is changing, and you have to figure out, you know, information and aggregation, and that's really the key for the future. So what's the best way to get on that and to still kind of fulfill this creative need is, like, again, understanding what brands need, understanding where the technology is going, and understanding like what you can do to be a part of it. I think still images will always play a part, because you will always need a placeholder, and most people remember stills more than they will a video sequence. They'll remember a still image in their memory. But I think video is really, really important to master and to have in your repertoire and to love just as much as you do. And then, you know, on top of it, the technology's here right now where you can shoot 4K video and take a screen grab from it if you're shooting fast enough. I mean, some people hate the idea of having a fast shutter speed when you're shooting 4K, but you can do that and then take a film still and you have an 8 meg file. An 8 meg raw file. So I mean, there's that potentiality too.
I mean, I find that our histories that we fell kind of into, it wasn't necessarily planned, but I really do love it because I love layers in storytelling. I love the oral narrative, and I love music. I really then says that I'm probably one of the most manipulative people.
Totally, emotionally manipulative.
I'm very emotionally manipulative, but it's because like I really understand how to bring people's emotions up and down, you know, hidden. I think you can really.
She does it to me every day.
You can really successfully do that with the you know, the narration and the music and the moving image. And if you need to put a still in it, fine. But I find that like the moving image is much more successful in really inciting all these emotions in here, especially when you add music to it.
How did you guys learn video? Was it pretty easy to do the transition, or did you...
On the field, like literally, when someone hired us for that national commercial, we had to learn.
Or like when the Haiti earthquake happened, that's right when the Canon 5D Mark II came out, and I shot a video from Lowy. Right? Like Moby music?
You used the Moby music, the Moby music to edit that.
Yeah, and like that was just, I did not know anything about shooting video. Like shot at like an 8,000 shutter speed.
I mean,
you know, like we just made all the mistakes that you're, you know, but who cares, right? Like you were just learning that. Like to now, you know, we shoot. You know, we understand like, oh, we're using 8-bit Sony cameras, so we can only shoot it in this way when we're in the field, or do we want to switch to 10-bit and use something else? And it's like, so there's, you know, you learn it from the field, you learn by doing. Like Marvi still doesn't know the menu systems to Sony cameras. Like that's my job.
I'm not like a technical person. Like I like composing and I like building the narrative and structuring it. But then when I'm like, Ben, okay, so this is the shot, this is how I want, can you make that happen?
Meanwhile, I'm doing like bullet time with like arc zeros all over the place, connected to recorders and like stuff mounted all over the place.
But with videography, with filmmaking, you have to understand what your strengths and your weaknesses are and realize that you have to work as a team. Like you just become a part of this cog. Like we don't physically do the edit. We have an editor, but we sit with our editor and say, you know, this isn't working, this isn't enough. But, you know, I don't feel that it is good use of my time to learn Premiere Pro. I just don't. I'm not going to go back at this point in my career and learn that program. Someone will edit for us, but then, you know, we will be the one directing. You know, it's just, you have to just understand that you're now part of a team.
You know, and like, you know, I don't know everything about video, but we know enough to do the things we want. If somebody's going to call us to ask us to do like a car commercial, you know, for Honda, but that's not this running on style that we use, like, you know, there are certain techniques, but you know, we don't know how to do that high-end stuff. Like when we did a TV commercial for a hospital, that they wanted to use an RE because they wanted like 2K at 120. So we ended up having
a camera operator.
A camera operator who's like doing this move, and then I'll be like, this is what I want. I want this to happen.
we ended up having, and I know you're going to tell me it didn't happen, but it totally didn't happen. The Jerry Maguire, not the Jerry Maguire, okay, Jerry Bruckheimer, you know, like the action movie star, he has a thing where like the hero is standing on a turntable and is rotating clockwise, and the camera is down below and rotates counterclockwise as it comes up, and when they both turn at the right point, they meet in the middle, there's an American flag building and an explosion. It's in every Jerry Bruckheimer movie. Like, think about like Bad Boys with like Will Smith. He stands there, and like as he turns this way, the camera goes in the opposite direction and comes up in a spiral. It's his calling card. And I was like, we're gonna do something like that. And like this commercial for like cancer ward in a hospital. Totally had no place in this commercial, but I was like, we're gonna make this happen. And it took like 4 hours to do it. We had a camera operator to missing. We didn't have a turntable, so like the actors were just turning like this on a hug, like, you know, but so like knowing how things are done and doing things and trying to apply it, yeah, that's important, but we just learn from doing it in the field.
But also like when you, especially, you know, for me, I know the reason why we switched to Sony, where I switched to Sony is because they're so light. But when it comes to the advertising commercials, I don't handle the camera. We have a camera operator, and we just tell them exactly how to do it. And in these kind of situations where there's, you know, a big
it's more about an idea.
Everyone really looks up to you for directing, right? Like even the cameramen are asking you, at which point do I wrap focus? At which point do they end up focusing? So like literally everything is up to you. So when you're directing, everything from the close to the final edit,
so the
it has to be passed through you. So I don't necessarily have to know exactly all the technical aspects of an ARRI, right, or a RED or whatever camera. I don't have the time to know that because I am literally thinking about everything else to put into the scene because everyone has a job. Like your camera operator, it's his job to know the camera.
Right, so
like
when Marvi's getting ready to direct and she's like, okay, this is what we're gonna do with this person, she gets the emotional thing. I'll be talking to the grip. I'd be like, I need some lens flare. It needs to come from this direction. I don't know how he does it because when we're using these giant ARRI cameras or anything else with the anamorphic lenses, I'm not gonna do my nose grease thing on that lens. It's like the lens is worth more than our house. So I'm gonna be like, you need to have this light coming up. And he's like, I can make that happen. I can have some light coming in here, it can be here. And I was like, I want it to be like a blue tone. Because we have to have the concept, the people around us that we're using are gonna know how to make that concept happen. And that's all about delegation, right? Of delegating.
Yeah, like, I find that in video you have less ego because everyone really
has a job. And I think that's really important. When you're doing it yourself, or when we're doing our run and gun stuff, for what we do, that's important. That like, so when we're in the field and I'm saying, okay, we're shooting in a really contrasty environment with like the lions who are moving, and it's super bright. I don't want to use ND filters, but I also want to shoot S-Log, and so I'm going to put it on Atmos so I get the most out of an 8-bit camera. Like, those are all things that I know how to do, that I can, you know, in a limited ability, because that's what we need to do to get the shot where we are. If we needed to go up and do more and have a bigger production, then we call other people in.
Who actually know how to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the time to
like what you can do and what you know what you can do. And like, we're always educating ourselves. Like, we decided that, you know, I don't know if you guys all shoot Sony cameras or not, but like, we all decided that with the way the light was in Kenya, that we were going to shoot S-Log 2 rather than S-Log 3. And I'm like researching and looking about how the gammas are different for those environments, and like whether or not we wanted to use, you know, different types of combinations of lens filters on there to like get the colors right. And you know, Atmos actually gave us the Ninja 5, which is a lot smaller and was able to work in the confined space that we were in this car. And so we're like putting all this stuff together, and like that's the stuff that we educate ourselves because we have to for that job. But beyond that, am I going to like go into, there's a guy, he's this British cameraman who has this web, do you remember his name? Who has LUTs for like every single combination of camera and recorder like on the planet. He's like,
2/3 of the stop underexposed to really get blacks in here, and maybe a half step here with this camera and this. And I'm like, Jesus, I don't need to know this. I like the idea that someone else in the world knows this, but I don't need to know this. Like, I'm not shooting Star Wars. I would, but I'm not right now. But when I do get Star Trek, I will learn more when I need to.
Does anyone else have a question?
Just a question. Well, both of you, what is like your guys' hardest job to shoot and why?
I still think it was the playground in New York. I was actually really scared of the hardest job.
So the pedophile label really kind of should.
Yeah, like I should have just shown up in a trench coat.
For me,
And it worked.
for me, it's always where you have to be really physically imposing. Physically, really, I can never transform into that.
In the past,
so
what have you shot that was like the most difficult?
Yeah, so it would be something along the lines of like being in front of police riot police, because they can be very aggressive. And someone was like berating me and yelling at me, and I almost cried. Because you just, that's the time when you can't use that to your advantage. When they see you and they see that you're small and you're this woman and they have this idea of who you are. Like, no matter how much I was asserting myself, like, I couldn't physically, like, impose myself in that situation. I just couldn't. Like, I was yelling at this guy, and it's just like this, this tiny little one yelling at this big cop, and there's nothing I could do. And he just pushed me back and out of the line, and I just couldn't do it. So some things can be a disadvantage.
I don't know. Like, I've had like hard assignments that have been hard to do, but the challenge is worth it. I usually say like, I fucked it up, and she's like, no, you didn't. But like I recently.
It's always the subway for you.
The subway is really hard for me, but
even when I'm with Ben in New York, even this last time a month ago, I could see him plan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still. Even in 2002 when I got beaten up, I a group of like 20 men dragged me into the street and beat the shit out of me, taking a photo. And that trauma has really. I owe you $2. Yes. That trauma has really. Stayed on me, where I'm really tentative about shooting things sometimes, whereas a lot of people feel that like a camera is their ticket to photograph and feel less vulnerable. A camera makes me feel more vulnerable. Like, I will walk into any store, any country in the world, and start talking or be the life of the party if I don't have a camera. When I have a camera around my neck, it makes me feel really super vulnerable. I get shy and stand in the corner. And it's just that leftover from the trauma. So anytime that I don't have, like, there's like a mental thing where if I have an assignment, fine. But if I don't have an assignment and I'm just walking around, it's actually fairly hard for me from a mental point of view to shoot. Yeah. Answered every question, Marvi. No one has.
What's the meaning of life?
Yeah, 14.
All right.
Cool. Guys, thank you so much. I want like 20 new Instagram followers.
Yeah, so our Instagram are at Ben Lowy, at Marvi, and